Her husband, Kirk, was a respected deputy with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. But on the night of September 23rd, 2018, that dream turned into a nightmare. Born in Fayetteville, North Carolina, on December 29th, 1984, Samantha faced some real struggles early on. She lost her mother to non-Hodgkin's cancer when she was only 16 years old. But she didn't let that grief break her. Instead, she stepped up and became the glue that held her family together. Her younger brother, Taylor Starling, later said, "We were best friends growing up since we lost our mom so young, and that tragedy really brought us closer. She was always in my corner, and honestly, she kind of became like a mother figure to me." Taking on that responsibility so young is what shaped Samantha into such an incredible woman. She was a natural caretaker even when she was fighting her own battles, and eventually attended Bloomingdale High School after the family moved to Brandon, Florida. That's where she met Kristen Kellen, the girl who would end up being her best friend for life. They graduated together in 2003 and became inseparable, mainly because Samantha had this magnetic personality you just couldn't ignore. Friends could tell right away that she was different because she truly loved living her life. Kellen would later describe her as electric and just unbelievably beautiful. Her uncle added that he just liked her, remembering the wild and wonderful times they shared together. But Samantha's bright personality wasn't the only thing drawing people in. She instinctively knew how to make everyone feel safe and valued. You could see that quality everywhere, from how she looked after her little brother to the way she helped strangers in need. Samantha somehow managed to balance 2 high-pressure jobs while raising 4 children at the same time. By September 2018, she'd been promoted to assistant manager at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Tampa, where she'd worked for over a decade. She honestly felt like that casino was her home away from home. Everyone there respected her hustle and how well she understood the ins and outs of the business. Joe Lupo later stated, "Sam was part of our Hard Rock family for over 10 years and was genuinely loved by everyone who knew her." We're focused on supporting each other through this loss, but Samantha was never the type to just sit back and relax. She had actually trained as a nurse and was testing her business chops by investing in real estate. Even though she had never actually taken a formal real estate class, she had just started working for Keller Williams Realty in Lakeland, Florida, and was already crushing it in her new role. Her team leader, Damian Boyce, said she fit right in and had a real knack for finding high-end homes. She performed exceptionally well in the Tampa Bay area during the short time she was there. Samantha showed the same grit that defined her whole life, even though she'd only been in real estate for a few months before she died. Her coworker, Chris McLaughlin, called her Wonder Woman because she could handle all those jobs and still raise 4 kids. She worked the early shift at the casino and then stayed up late studying real estate law. She drove the kids to school, packed their lunches, and helped them with their homework every single day. People were amazed at how she pulled it off because she made it all look so effortless. But more importantly, she made sure everyone around her felt loved and taken care of. At her funeral, Rose Sanabria shared how Samantha helped her escape an abusive relationship, which really shows who Sam was at her core. Samantha would tell me, "Rose, you deserve better than that, and you're not alone because so many people love you. You have to leave," Sanabria recalled, noting that Samantha was shielding others from the very fate that would eventually take her. Samantha always recognized when someone was hurting and stepped in to help them out. Samantha married Kirk Keithley in 2012, and the two blended their families to raise 4 kids, including her 14-year-old son, Mark. Then there was Peyton, Kirk's son from a previous marriage, who was 7 years old. Together they had 4-year-old Olivia and 2-year-old Avalyn, and from the outside, they looked like the picture-perfect family. They finally bought their dream house in February 2018 on Terraza Way in the Bexley neighborhood of Land O'Lakes. The cream-colored 2-story home cost $322,000 and looked like the American dream come to life. It was quiet, family-friendly, and close to great schools, making it look like the perfect spot to raise their kids. Kirk seemed like the picture-perfect example of a steady, reliable cop that any family would feel lucky to have protecting them. He had been on the payroll as a deputy for the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office ever since June 15th, 2009. Before landing that gig, he worked for the St. Petersburg Police Department, clocking in nearly 20 years of service without any major red flags. On the surface, his career looked perfectly stable, though nothing to write home about. However, there were subtle cracks in the facade that his relatives would later look back on with agonizing clarity. According to Samantha's family, Kirk carried himself with a sense of superiority and barely said a word during family get-togethers. Her older sister's husband mentioned that Kirk acted like he had zero interest in actually getting to know his in-laws over dinner. While his service record didn't have any career-ending strikes, it definitely highlighted some troubling behavioral patterns. He caught a formal warning in 2016 for misusing police databases and a counseling memo in 2011 for a preventable cruiser crash. Even more telling was a 2008 review from the St. Pete Department describing his personality as rigid and suggesting he needed help learning to interact with people. When law enforcement evaluators use a word like austere to describe an officer, it carries a lot of weight. It paints a picture of a guy who is icy, distant, and emotionally checked out. Basically, he was missing the fundamental social skills that are crucial for effective policing. The fact that his bosses clocked this and thought he needed remedial training proves that even his professional peers could tell he struggled to connect with humans. Despite these professional hiccups, there wasn't a single paper trail of domestic disturbance calls coming from their residents. Not even the people inside their inner circle suspected that Samantha was in any kind of imminent peril. This is a terrifyingly common scenario when law enforcement officers are the ones behind the domestic violence. The perpetrator knows the system inside out, keeping their abuse invisible to the public while maintaining total dominance in private. However, the neighbors painted a contrasting picture, one that illustrated how control manifests in the quietest ways. The Keithleys were neighbors with Griffith for 5 years before moving out to Land O'Lakes in February 2018. Griffith joked that being the social butterfly who knew everyone on the block made him the unofficial mayor of the neighborhood. But Kirk Keithley was the one nut he couldn't crack. She was super warm until Kirk showed up. Then she would just offer a polite wave. Looking back now, he admits that those small details are absolutely chilling. It suggests that Samantha had been conditioned to shift her entire demeanor whenever Kirk was around. A classic hallmark of coercive control. Griffith tried on multiple occasions to get Kirk to open up or just chat. He even introduced him to a fellow deputy from Georgia, hoping the shared badge would spark a bond, but Griffith said he just turned his back and blew them off. That kind of aggressive social withdrawal is another massive red flag for domestic abuse. Predators often work to cut their partners off from anyone who might offer a lifeline, making it harder for victims to gain perspective. Unfortunately, those subtle clues weren't loud enough to forecast the horror that was coming. Experts on intimate partner violence warn that the most lethal time for a victim is when they start asserting independence or try to walk away. And Samantha's booming career in the real estate game might have been viewed as a direct challenge to Kirk's authority. The most gut-wrenching part of the Samantha Keithley tragedy is that it wasn't some freak anomaly. Data indicates that families of officers experience higher rates of domestic violence, and when things go south, the lethality risk skyrockets. The guys working alongside Kirk didn't have a clue about the nightmare unfolding behind his front door. This silence is typical in police households where abuse is frequently swept under the rug or kept strictly within the family. Officers are trained experts in evidence collection, which means they also know how to avoid leaving it. They understand the mechanics of a response, and victims are often terrified that dialing 911 will just bring their abuser's buddies to the doorstep. Plus, the cumulative trauma of wearing the badge and seeing the worst of humanity every day can wreck a person's psyche. Without healthy outlets, some officers self-medicate with booze, pills, or by taking their aggression out on loved ones. This destructive spiral often happens when they don't get the mental health support they desperately need. In Kirk's situation, the toxicology report would later expose just how wasted he was the night he took Samantha's life. He was far too intoxicated to be thinking straight or making rational choices. His blood alcohol content was 0.156, nearly double the Florida limit, mixed with a dose of oxycodone on September 23rd, 2018. The night started out typical enough, but the atmosphere inside the Keithley house turned dark in a heartbeat. Samantha was down with a simple bug that her husband should have helped her manage, but instead, it spiraled into 6 hours of terror, ending in death. Samantha made it crystal clear to Kirk time and again that she felt sick and just needed to be left alone. Any decent partner would have been fine with simply letting her rest when she wasn't feeling well. Instead, Kirk just got angrier and more aggressive, dragging the fight out for hours as the booze made him increasingly unstable. We'll probably never know for sure exactly what set Kirk off so badly that night, so maybe it was work stress, money troubles, or just jealousy over Samantha's booming real estate career. Or it could have been a lethal mix of drugs, alcohol, and his controlling nature finally boiling over. Things got intense enough that Samantha felt she had to leave, so she packed up and checked into a hotel. That detail is crucial because it proves she recognized the danger and took real steps to protect herself. She likely went to the hotel to let things cool off, which was a smart move in such a volatile situation. Tragically, Samantha made the fatal mistake of going back to the house, possibly thinking he had simmered down. Maybe she was worried about the kids, or perhaps she felt like she really had nowhere else to turn. Whatever she was thinking, that choice cost her her life, suggesting she didn't realize how deadly the situation had become. You see this kind of tragic pattern play out all too often in domestic abuse cases. Victims frequently downplay the threat because they can't fathom that their partner is actually capable of murder. The psychological mind games make it nearly impossible for people in these relationships to gauge when they are truly unsafe. Samantha fired off those frantic last texts to Kristen Kellen at 11:50 at night, saying Kirk had completely snapped. She wrote that he was self-destructing and had been harassing her for 6 hours even though she was sick and begging for peace. Those messages clearly show a terrified woman reaching out to her best friend as a lifeline. Saying he lost his mind implies this level of craziness was extreme, even for their already rocky relationship. She also mentioned tossing her ring outside, a telling sign that she considered the marriage officially over. By flinging that wedding ring away, Samantha was effectively declaring that they were finished. That act of defiance likely fueled his rage, and the timestamp on those texts is heartbreakingly significant. At 11:50 p.m., Samantha was alive and communicating, but she would be gone just over an hour later. Kellen didn't see the messages until 2 a.m., which was far too late to do anything about it. She texted back around 7 the next morning, but she later admitted she knew the damage was already done. It's gut-wrenching to think about the guilt Kellen must carry knowing she missed her best friend's final plea for help. Kirk gunned Samantha down while she was sitting on the downstairs couch around midnight on September 24th. Since she was sitting down, she probably didn't see it coming and likely thought Kirk had finally chilled out. Or maybe she was just exhausted and done fighting after being badgered for 6 hours straight. Regardless, Kirk took advantage of her vulnerability to exert ultimate control, shooting her before turning the gun on himself. But the violence didn't just end with the pulling of a trigger. 4 kids were in the house when this nightmare unfolded, and the trauma they experienced will stay with them forever. Mark Price, only 14 at the time, showed incredible courage when he heard the shot and found his mom. Instead of freezing, he acted fast to save his little brothers, escaping by crawling under the garage door to get help. That quick thinking proves he kept his head even in the middle of a complete disaster. Then he made that vital 911 call to alert the police about the tragedy inside. You could hear the terror in his voice, but he held it together remarkably well for a kid living through hell. He kept repeating, "My mom's been shot. Oh my God. My stepdad just shot my mom in the head." Reports say Mark managed to give the dispatcher all the necessary details despite being in shock. The operator asked about the weapons and tried to figure out exactly what had gone down. He explained they had been fighting all night. She left and came back, and then he heard the gunshot. He described finding her bloody and lifeless, and the heartbreak in his voice is absolutely devastating. No child should ever see a parent like that, let alone have to explain it to emergency services. When asked to describe his stepdad, he just kept saying, "He shot my mom in the head. He just shot her." It was clear the poor kid was struggling to even process the reality of what just happened. When your brain tries processing something impossible to grasp, it frequently loops back through old wounds. Then the connection just went dead. Operators spent several terrifying minutes trying to reestablish contact, but they could not get through. Nobody knew if Mark was safe or if Kirk remained a danger to those kids. Finally, Mark rang them back and explained his device had malfunctioned. A friend's dad hopped on the line, informing the operator that the boy was with him and really struggling to cope. He mentioned 2 little stepsisters were standing right out in the front yard. Hearing that detail definitely puts my mind at ease. Neighbors had taken in the rest of the children, keeping them secure and out of harm's way. Pasco County deputies pulled up past midnight and walked into a nightmare that would haunt them for a long time. They discovered Samantha lifeless on the sofa, a victim of gunfire. Upstairs, they located Kirk with an apparent self-inflicted bullet wound to his skull. Fortunately, all 4 kids were physically unharmed, though they were obviously shaken up and terrified. The events that unfolded here early this morning are absolutely heartbreaking. Sheriff Chris Nacco stated that once you cross the line from protector to abuser, you lose the privilege to wear the badge, no matter which department you serve. Toxicology reports confirmed earlier suspicions that Kirk had substantial amounts of alcohol and oxycodone in his system that evening. Mixing those downers destroys your judgment, amplifies rage, and drives people toward reckless behavior that often ends in death. Samantha's uncle, Ted Friley, later insisted that the booze and pills were no excuse. He placed the blame squarely on Kirk's shoulders. Nothing mitigates the agony or justifies his actions. The entire community was in shock, but local real estate agents rallied together instantly. Within 24 hours, her colleagues launched a GoFundMe campaign to support the 4 kids left behind, and that effort managed to pull in nearly $80,000 for the family. While Samantha's dad took custody of the children, that massive financial safety net helped secure their long-term well-being. A massive crowd gathered at Bell Shoals Baptist Church in Brandon on October 2nd, 2018. Ted Friley shared a crucial perspective on her memory, urging everyone not to let her final terrifying moments define her entire existence. Her journey meant so much more than how it ended. Focusing on the end ignores 33 years of a beautiful life, complete with triumphs, struggles, joy, tears, and above all, her babies. This tragedy highlighted a glaring lack of mental health resources available to law enforcement personnel. The situation deteriorated when Deputy Terry Strawn died only 3 months later. He was a highly regarded veteran with a clean record who had recently started working school security. Yet on December 19th, 2018, he murdered his spouse, granddaughter, and daughter before taking his own life. He narrated his actions to police dispatchers the entire time. Kirk and Strawn were polar opposites. One was drunk with rage, while the other was eerily calm, yet both were decorated servicemen. Both men annihilated their families, proving just how oblivious their colleagues were to the brewing storms inside them. Strawn's case was particularly disturbing since his granddaughter was a student at the very school he was sworn to guard, leaving a permanent stain on his legacy. These combined events underscored the extreme peril involved when officers turned their aggression toward their own households, and revealed that deputies rarely utilized therapy services because they were terrified of the stigma. Following these 2 fatalities, the department brought on full-time psychologists to be on staff and introduced therapy dogs, chaplaincy services, a behavioral resource unit, and required training on suicide prevention. The agency also pushed for a cultural shift to destigmatize the act of asking for assistance. Chronister emphasized that nobody is invincible, noting that admitting you are struggling is actually a sign of strength, not weakness. For 33 years, Samantha modeled resilience and devotion. She became a mom at 16 and juggled several jobs to provide for her 4 kids. She was also known for helping her friends escape abusive partners. Her passing sparked major reforms that have likely saved other families from enduring this same kind of nightmare. Her legacy lives on through the 4 children she adored more than anything. Sam was always a protector, and Mark proved he inherited that same brave instinct when he dialed 911. And even after her death, Samantha Keithley continues to aid others through the systemic changes her case inspired. When we recall Samantha, let's focus on her radiance rather than the brutality she suffered. Never let her memory fade. If you or someone close to you is facing domestic violence, please reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline immediately. For anyone having thoughts of self-harm, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Remember, you are not in this alone. This case was truly unsettling, but it is one that will stick with us forever. If this story kept you guessing, show some love by hitting like and subscribing to the show. We drop a brand new case file every single evening. I will see you tomorrow. keep your head on a swivel. In this video, we're looking into the heartbreaking case of Samantha Keithley, a dedicated mom whose life was cut short in the most horrific way imaginable. 33-year-old Samantha Keithley seemed to be living the kind of life that most people only ever dream about. She was juggling 2 successful careers and raising 4 kids in a gorgeous house down in Land O'Lakes, Florida.